end the stream, even if it does not stream us on Facebook. Oh, boom, we're connected. Okay, that is great. We are ready. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, let me just let Kaylee know. I got it. Okay, sweet.
All right, I'm gonna get out of the Facebook group here.
Yep, go ahead, remove that. And I'm gonna hit go live in 3, 2, 1. All right, it says it's loading. It's starting. Boom, we are live. What is going on, everybody? Welcome. Happy Friday. I think it is the first day of November. Hopefully everybody had a good Halloween yesterday. I am here today with my good friend, Katie. Katie, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Katie, thanks so much for hopping on today. For those that don't know Katie, I've had the pleasure of working with both her and her husband, Brian. They own their land business together. They are based up in the Northeast. I'm actually forgetting, you're in Pennsylvania somewhere, right?
Yes, yep, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
About an hour north of Philly.
About an hour north of Philly. We love it. So anybody else from the Pennsylvania, Philly area, go ahead and let us know in the comments. And that's actually a good place to start here. If you are here live with us, let us know. Let us know in the comments. Give us a hey, hello, whatever. What we're going to be doing today is a little bit of, it'll be a call review. And I've never done one of these live before, which is also why we're about 10 minutes late here. So apologies on just getting some of these kinks going. But we are super excited to do this. Hopefully I am able to share my screen and share audio pretty easily in here. So we will find out soon enough. With that, Katie, do you want to give us just a little bit of an intro and a background on yourself so folks know? Just tell us how long you guys have been doing land, you know, what sort of deals you like to do, and where you guys are headed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for the opportunity to be able to come on and partner with you. Brian and I have been in the land business for about 14 months now. So just a little over a year here. I actually ended up leaving my W-2 at the end of this summer. So I have really been full-time focused on land, really just since August. So it's been a pretty crazy ride. My background is actually in staffing and headhunting and recruiting. So had a lot of transferable skills, but by no means had really any type of a real estate background or land knowledge. So had a little bit of a learning curve, but it has been, just such an amazing and wonderful ride.
I love that. I love that. And congratulations that you finally quit your job. I mean, not finally, as if that took super long. I mean, you guys crushed it this for like a year. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that is awesome. That is so awesome. Also, what's up, Jennifer? I see you're in live with us. Mr. Michael Hopkins, you are very welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying this, man. Hope Florida's treating you well. So we got a couple live with us. We got about 5 tuned in right now, Katie.
Cool.
So that's super fun. But with that, guys, we're going to get kicked off here. Katie was nice enough to prep a call for us. And so we've just been working together one-on-one for a little bit over a week now. And, I did a little post on Instagram. I don't love doing one-on-one stuff a lot. So it's always got to be like the right person. But I basically said, hey, I want a guinea pig. I want to have someone to work with, see if I can help transform what you're doing in sales in a relatively short amount of time. We've met, 3 or 4 times now. And I would say, I think we're already making some pretty good progress. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really funny as I was listening back to this call myself, and the whole call is about 45 minutes, so it's not a short one.
Right.
But as I was listening back, I thought, oh my goodness, in just really 2 call reviews with you, I'm already seeing the improvements in the conversation and just being able to, steer it in the right direction and overcome some objections, keep us on track. And so it was pretty amazing to, hear it back this time, but only really after 2 call reviews that we've done. So
how cool is that? How cool is that? I love it. Well, sweet.
Great.
Well, then
So excited.
let's go ahead and dive on in. I'm not sure how long we'll go on this, but I think we've got an hour on the calendar from when we were supposed to start about 15 minutes ago. So with that, I'm going to hit this nifty little present button. Oh boy, share screen. Some screens let you share audio. Okay. So let's see what we're doing here. Okay. And I do have share audio tab on. That's good. Awesome. I think we will be able to do this. Boom.
All right.
Okay. I think we are looking at the screen here. And does it flip between the tab? No, it does not. Gosh darn. Okay, we're going to stop the screen share for a second. Sorry, guys. Like I said, technical difficulties is our first time doing this. I really, really appreciate everybody's patience, though. So now we are sharing screens here. We're going to jump in. I'll be flipping around on a couple of screens. And here, let me just grab this so I can see the folks that are live with us and move it to my other monitor. I might need to get a third one here soon. But we've got about 6 or 7 tuned in live, so that's fun. All right, guys, we're going to start doing this call review. And basically how this goes is I am going to throw up this call that Katie's got for us. She was nice enough to timestamp some things. So we're going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to give her live feedback, and yeah, we're just going to have fun with it. If you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. Would love to answer those throughout, but we'll get started. Katie, do you want to give us just a little bit of context on this seller in this call?
Yeah, so this is actually the second call that I
Okay.
have this seller. And at this point, I have contacted one of our land specialists, our partners that we've worked with on a couple different deals. And he had some very specific questions that he wanted some answers to in order to come up with really the best, evaluation for the lot. There are two. So there are 2 lots. They are adjacent. And these are waterfront properties.
Okay. 2 lots, waterfront properties, second call. So we're making an offer on this call, right?
Essentially. I'm trying to get an idea of where their head is at. And the reason why I picked this call, and you guys will hear it over and over and over, he probably says, I don't know, 10 times during this call that they essentially have no urgency.
Sure. Okay. That's good.
So I was trying to get a ballpark from them so I could nail them down.
Okay. Okay. Well, we will dive into it. Also, just funny, your very cute husband Brian says Katie is awesome in the comments. So that's good. I'm glad he thinks so. As do I. Katie is awesome. I agree. Okay. With that, I'm gonna get us kicked off. Sound good?
All right.
Let's do this.
Rock and roll.
Hello.
Hi, good morning, Greg.
Yes.
Hi, it's Katie calling with Patriot Plots. How are you?
Good.
Good, good. Do you have a couple minutes?
Sure.
All right, wonderful.
I love when sellers start with
like, oh, you're calling.
Right. It's also, I will say, so you did nothing wrong here, Katie. Is why on a lot of calls, two quick notes here. If I sense that somebody is not super into the call, I'm going to do 2 things. The first one's with my words. The second one is with my volume and my tone, right? And so first with my words, I like to give that seller their protection by letting them allow with a no if it is a bad time, right? And how I do that is with a question of like, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? Right? And you'll notice when I said that, I leaned in and I got quieter, right? And the reason for that is when you get quieter, your other person on the line, your seller in this scenario, is going to lean in, right? They're either going to pay more attention or they're going to pay less attention, meaning like, hey, the call needs to end and you need to schedule a different time. And so, just a good little tidbit there is your tonality stayed consistent, which again isn't a bad thing, right? You sound consistent, you sound authentic, like all that stuff's really important in your calls, Katie. But it's the same way that like when I'm telling a story, right, and I'm really excited and I'm up here versus if I'm down here and I get really, really quiet, right? Your attention changes throughout, right? And so I bring that all up to say, if I'm starting out a call and I sense somebody's not super engaged, I might play with tonality early on just to get them to lean in a little bit, right? Because listen, like we're calling busy sellers. We're calling busy sellers
Yes.
because they're people and everyone's busy, right? I don't care who you are. I mean, gosh, I talk to people that live on, I feel like government like money, what's that stuff called? Either whatever, when they get the paychecks because they're not working anymore. And they're still super busy somehow, right? Even though they don't have jobs and don't have kids and don't have responsibilities, and they're still busy. Everyone's busy, right? And so, anyways, point being, sellers are busy. We usually catch them in the middle of stuff they're doing. If we don't, that's awesome. But if we do, we want to make sure we can have their attention, right? So all that to say, you can play with your words and tonality just a little bit there, because when someone says sure, I would almost double down and just be like, okay, hey, if this is a bad time, we can schedule a better time to chat. Is now a bad time? No, this is fine. And now he's more in, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. And which is so funny is because he answered the first time this way as well.
Okay.
But then he just keeps the conversation rolling.
Really? Okay.
All right.
So you break down the walls. That's what I like to hear.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. Okay, let's keep it moving.
All right.
I apologize. It's taken me a couple days to be able to get back to you. Unfortunately, our nanny was out of the country all last week, and so we were juggling quite a bit of our normal day-to-day, but also our 2 and 4-year-old. So, really wanted to make sure that we spent some good time looking into your properties so that we would be able to, see if we can come to an agreement that's really going to work for everybody.
Okay.
Okay. So I just had a couple of quick questions.
And Katie, I know we talked about framing before or after you already did this call, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you guess kind of what I'm thinking through just with that little tidbit there?
Absolutely.
Tell us. Tell the room.
So essentially, you would want me to have explained to him, what we're going to be doing during this call, approximately how long it's going to be taking, what the end goal is at the end of the call, and what next steps ideally would look like if we can come to an agreement.
Man, you should be teaching me.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
Perfect. And the point for that being at the end of this, you don't really give him much, right? You just kind of like, okay, there's not much there, which is fine. But again, why I typically will like to end things with questions too. Yeah. So, if we were to frame, give the agenda, give the time, right? I would say something like, okay, sounds great. Like, do you have 10 or 15 minutes right now? Still a good time, right? And you can at least reconfirm the question, re-engage them a bit, and then keep it rolling. But let's, again, these are super small things that at this point you already know, but it's so fun to dive into this stuff.
No, and it's good to reiterate them too. And this is my second call with him. So he did know that I was going to be calling him back with some questions and it was going to take some time. And really just because it's a little complex and these lots are, they have a higher value to them, really wanted to make sure that we had a solid understanding of what the price point was going to look like before going back to them.
Totally. And hey, as I'm doing this, can someone please just let me know in the chat, are you guys able to hear the audio off the call okay? If someone could just give me like a thumbs up or a yes or something. I think we're good. I did click the share sound, but I just want to double check. With that, I'm going to keep on going.
For you. Just in regards to the water, and I know that you've owned it for a long time, but you've never actually, obviously lived there because both of the lots are vacant. Do you have any idea when you have low tide, if, there is still the opportunity to take a boat in and out, or if you're looking at essentially, not dry, but, mud really, or the bottom of the lake, up to the property?
There are moorings just at the edge of the property, right outside the what's remaining.
So I want to point something out because you can tell this guy just opened up, right? I'm guessing this is where he starts being more chatty.
Oh, yes.
And the reason for that being, Katie, you asked such a good question, and it wasn't good because of the way you asked it or anything. But anybody that's watched some of my training before knows I always talk about how authority is really just built in questioning. And you asked such a nuanced question that only somebody that understands waterfront lots would probably be asking here, right? And so because of that, he takes you at a level of seriousness, and that's the switch I think we just saw flip with him, right?
Yes.
Versus if you're like, what could you tell me about access on the property? Guys, which isn't a bad question, not a bad question at all, right? But there's a difference in sophistication on what you just asked versus like a general question anyone could ask about any property.
And I now know that that is called a mud flat, not dry mud or the bottom of the river. It's called a mud flat.
There we go.
So now I have that word track to take forward.
There we go. We're learning every day. We're learning every day.
Absolutely.
I love it.
You have the dam there where people put boats there, and there's a little beach area where boats are able to come in. Kayaks and canoes go in there, in and out of there all the time. And there's a little ramp that they can pull kayaks and canoes out of the water. As far as a mooring right off the property at low tide, at very low tide, extreme low tide, there are mud flats there, and so it's not water immediately next to the right on the edge of the property is moorings that are further out.
Okay. That's just one thing that I, wanted to confirm. And either way, I'm sure it's absolutely beautiful, but it's really just a matter of, are you able to take your boat in and out at any point in time? And really, depending upon the tide, you may not, right? Unless if you, and some people I know anchor their boats out further.
It's unlikely that the town or the state would allow in that area, allow a dock to be put out. That would, what would be required is a dock to go out far enough.
Hey, Katie, I'm going to skip around too, just since we've got a live audience here today. I'm looking at the notes you would send over. The good thing about StreamYard is it just keeps that tab open, so they can't see all the notes you type for me. Nice try, guys. I'm just kidding. And everyone did confirm that the audio is good too, just so you know, Katie. But I think I'm going to jump into just like what attracted him about the lot and let him tell us a little bit about the background there. I think there's some good learning in that. Is there anything else you think we need to learn before we jump to minute 9 here?
Just the sort of the back to questioning piece. That's where after he tells me a story for a couple of minutes, I kind of reel him back in to keep going through the agenda that I have.
Yep.
But other than that, I think, so what attracted to them, he, goes into the why behind it. And then I sort of have to divert him back to the specifics of the questioning.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. And yeah, I would never suggest you cut off a seller. So I think you do a good job of just letting him talk, right? I think if you do sort of cut off or interrupt a seller, it kind of messes with the flow of the conversation a little bit. And now they feel like you're telling them what to do, and they're like just sitting and waiting for orders rather than you just having a conversation, right? And so we want to let our sellers think they're in control, and regardless of if they are or they're not, right? So I think what you did there was a good job. Let's learn about why he bought the sucker.
That we would be interested in making an offer on both of them, so that at the end of the day, it's one, purchase agreement, but we would be looking at purchasing both lots.
I think that makes sense to keep the two together, but also have them keep them as separate lots.
Correct.
Particularly if you're building two structures, two different residence on. It's nice to have it as separate lots. Correct. I'll tell you a couple of things more about the property that attracted us. Yes. And back to the issue of perking and septic. My understanding is, now it's been 40 years, one of the properties, and I think it's the one that's the furthest to the south, did perk from, not something we did. We never asked for it to perk, but did perk. The upper lot, or the one that's further to the north of the two, the first one you come to, that was the one that had difficulty because of the ledge going down, finding a place for a perk. So I think that's the one that has the separate septic field. That's just. Have you seen the plot that shows those two little septic areas?
So I'm just looking at the overview on some mapping that we have. I would probably have to pull it up on the GIS website to look into anything. Well,
if you
further.
Look at where Captain Parker Road comes down, and just when it reaches the upper, it would be the northeast corner of that first lot. It takes about almost a 90-degree turn to go down to the south. right at the edge of our upper property. The road does.
Yep.
That's kind of the corner of our property right there.
I see that.
The two little septic areas are just immediately to the northeast of that corner. So as you're coming down Captain Parker, just before you take the turn to the left to go down to where the common area is and onto our property, the little two septic fields are just there to the right, just off the road. And one of them obviously is not ours. One of them is our next door neighbor, and the other one is ours. And as you came up, I just couldn't remember that before, but I seem to remember building there. What size building it was exactly, and whether it's still being used as a schoolhouse, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I know that, at this point, for you and Jane, that, you know that you're not going to essentially build on the properties. You've got, homes elsewhere, and sort of, you've created your life with your full-time and your vacation home. But just want to get an understanding, how quickly are you looking to, have a sale on these properties? Are you at the point now where if there's, a reasonable offer that you would be willing to get under contract and then close within, whether it's 45 days or 60 days? Like, what does that time frame look like to you both?
Frankly, there is no particular time frame. We've owned the property now for 40 years.
40 years.
Or whatever. Or a little bit more than that, I think 40, maybe 42.
Okay, this is good. So, Katie, what are you thinking here before I start talking? Do you have any thoughts?
I had this call myself, and then I listened to this call again, and I'm listening it to again. And it's just, it's the no urgency piece.
Yeah.
That I continue to hear. And what I was trying to do is gauge him, like, what is their level of urgency? He makes it very quick that they don't have to sell it. It's a nice to have. He does go into a story about how, they were ideally going to be keeping these properties for like emergency reservation, right? So if either one of them needs to go into long-term care, they have this. And as he starts to explain that, I didn't really have it didn't click in my head while I was on the call to then maybe say to him, well, I completely understand the thought process behind that. It's always great to have, investments in your back pocket. However, at the end of the day, if you are going to need funds for something, selling properties, different times of year, different types of markets, it's not a sure thing that you're going to have these funds available to you when you really need them, as opposed to going through a sale, having them in your account, potentially investing them, et cetera. I thought about that after.
Right. That makes sense. And I think I would call to something that you and I spoke about probably just 2 sessions ago, I think, about talking through logic versus emotion, right? Now, before we get too deep into that, I will say you did something really well here, Katie, where you sort of recapped like, hey, dog, you don't need this anymore. Now, you said it much more eloquently, much more professionally, right? But it was, all right, listen, you've already got your house, your vacation homes, you've got your other stuff. You're not using the sucker. You did a great job of recapping that and letting him know what you're hearing, right? And something you can do too when you're sort of summarizing what you hear is, hey, if I heard you correctly, da 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 da. Is that correct? Is that right? Did I understand that correctly? They'll tell you yes or no, right? They may get defensive, they may not. Now, typically when somebody has owned a property for a super long time, right? 25, 30, 40 years, they're not really in a rush to sell most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time, right? And I think we've all, like, guys, I want to hear you comment if you've heard this from a seller ever. Well, I've owned it for 20 years. I could own it for another 20, or I'll give it to my kid.
Yes.
All the time, right? All the time. I'm not in any rush to sell. Cool. Instead of asking the question the way you did of like, oh, like, would you sell in the next 30, 45, 90 days? What's your ideal timeline? That's not where his head's at, right? his head's at like, well, like you reached out to me, you texted me, I figured sure it's worth a phone call, see what's going on, right? So I'm going to ask that question differently. I'm going to package it up differently. And so the way I like to do that is, guys, one of my favorite things to do in sales is almost like take away the response before it can happen by saying it first. Okay. And so how I would do that is like, let's say I'm talking to you, Katie, right? I would be like, hey, Katie, now listen, I understand you and your wife have owned this 40 years, right?
Yep.
You probably don't need to sell this in the next 30, 45, 60, 90 days. I'm sure you don't need to. But can I ask, I mean, if I put something together in front of you that, you know, you found reasonable, that you'd be willing to work with, is there anything preventing us from buying the property from you in the next 90 days or so? Right? So you almost take it away, right? Because now they're not going to, right? So now I'm asking, like, would you sell the property? Right? I'm just asking it in a different way.
Yes.
And rather than like, hey, how soon you want it sold? That's not where his head's at. Right? So instead of how soon do you want it sold, it's, hey, like, would you sell if something was in front of you, essentially? And you take away that whole piece of rada, rada, rada. I've been holding the 40 years. I'll hold another 40. I'll give it to my kids. You know, I don't need to sell, all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it definitely does. And I feel like a little bit later in the call, I go back to that
Right.
and I use that strategy. But it's towards the end, and that was just based off of the last coaching call that we had. So
Okay, that makes sense. Well, then we should have got on it quicker. You know, if I'd showed up a week sooner, we would have had a contract already, right? I'm teasing, but this is great. No, this is great. Let's keep listening to this part because I think there's going to be some good stuff here.
Yeah.
43 years. And it's clear to us, one thing that is clear to us is there is no incentive anymore for us to build a vacation home up there at this point.
Yep.
And at our age, it's not something that's going to happen.
Yep.
I was the last to give into that. Jane was convinced us maybe 10 years ago that it wasn't going to be something we would move up there. It doesn't make any sense. We're right near the water here on Cape Cod and Osterville, and having another property up there than a property in Florida just doesn't make any sense. So,
Yep.
Yes, are we prepared to sell? Yes, but there's no urgency to it. So we don't have a time frame to say
Sure.
we want to definitely sell it within the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Frankly, do we definitely need to sell it the next 2 or 3 years? Yeah, probably it would be good to take it away, but there isn't any urgency.
Yes. Yes. And part of the reason I'm asking is because, sometimes.
And again, so when a seller ever hits me with like what I would call, I don't know if I'd call this an objection, right? But it's something to the effect of like, there's no urgency. He's telling you that explicitly. I would just repeat it back. Hey, what's his name? Greg? No, did I make that up? Keith?
No, that's right.
Okay. Hey, Greg, I understand there's no urgency here. But if we were able to work out terms, I mean, would anything prevent us from the sale of the property in the next 90 or 120 days? I mean, it sounds like you could sit on it here for a bit, right? But if we came to terms, like, would we be able to do something in the near future, right? And then you're sort of anchoring too if you want to go for the double close a little bit with that longer time frame. But he's not in a rush, right? He just told us that, right? So could be to our advantage there. And again, just acknowledge whatever he's talking about, ask your question, and just keep the conversation moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. It's kind of the direction I go in.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah, I can tell you're about to go. I cut off old Katie.
People, like to move very, very quickly. I have somebody that, essentially has said, I need funds for a specific reason and I will sell it to you, but I need to close in 3 or 4 weeks. And then we go into, rush mode to try and get all of these things accomplished. And essentially what we're able to offer somebody when we have very little time to do all the work that we need to do prior to closing is a little bit of a different offer, right? Than when we have an extended time period to close, where we're able to do quite a bit more due diligence. We're able to really work our network, talk to all of our partners, we have a really expansive network of folks in New England, period. So whether it's New Hampshire or Maine or Massachusetts, we have a very expansive network. And that gives us a lot more time to be able to do everything that we need to do from a back office perspective, due diligence, and really line up a disposition strategy. And if, in your case, it would give us more than enough time to even talk to our family about the property.
Just to be clear again, the decision has been made that we are going to sell this property ultimately. There is absolutely no urgency. The only thing is that at some point, if we get closer to us, whether it's this winter or in the next month or two, to actually come up and talk and meet at the property, I would go up myself. I don't think Jane's interested in going up at this point, but to drive up and meet with her. We have an absence from New England for 2 months in February and March. We go down to Florida, so we're out of the area by then. So it's just something to consider. If you get closer and think this is a viable option, and meeting you up there, it might be.
Okay, so I think we kind of went in a circle there accidentally. Not your fault, right? I'm not saying bad job here. But I think when basically when he said, hey, not super urgent, you sort of explained like, hey, here's why I'm asking is because we got other people that need stuff done quickly. So here's what we do in that scenario. That makes sense, but it's not super relevant here. So I probably just wouldn't even talk about it. You know what I mean? And again, it's like I was saying earlier with like the logical versus emotional. I would just keep playing to his emotions a little bit. Hey, understand like there's no urgency here. But if we were to come to stuff, would you guys sell, right? If we came to terms, would anything prevent us from working together, right? If that's a yes, great. Now we keep pushing. Does that make sense? Okay, sweet. I'm going to skip ahead to...
I was going to say, he gets into some storytelling here.
And as valuable as that would be, maybe we'll package that up into different Facebook Live stories from our sellers, I'm sure we would all have plenty of stories to tell. But I'm gonna
And in that sort of in the storytelling, there's some storytelling for me, there's some storytelling for him, but what I'm really trying to do is be relatable, right? To him. And really give him the opportunity to, I feel like in storytelling, they're going to give you way more information, be a little bit more vulnerable and emotional, right? As they're starting to, think about their experience. But he is a like pseudo historian. So
we love
the information that he has just about the pond and the river and the Kennebunk River and the area and everything is just, it was very interesting. But I didn't want to cut him off, right? Because he was starting to get passionate.
That makes sense. So I'm looking at your sheet you drafted up for me here, Katie. I know in a couple of minutes we start talking land value. Do we get an asking price out of him?
So if you skip to about like 34, 35 or so, that's where we start to get into numbers to some extent.
Okay. Are you okay if we skip ahead to that?
That's fine.
Let's do it. I want to start talking money. I'm teasing. All right. I'm just a little, come on. This stuff's so finicky. I think that's about right.
Frankly, because, and as you saw, it's a little unusual to have two lots there.
Sure.
In different names. One in my wife's name and one in both our names. That was primarily to eliminate mostly any possibility in the future of them saying, well, you're non-compliant now. That's that you can only put one house on there. We divided into that so it's grandfathered in. But those are things we need to look into, obviously.
Of course. I mean, I would say, just based upon what I know about sort of my business and the, community of people who are, actively purchasing land, I think for this property, for these, I think other investors in this area would probably be looking to pay around, $150,000 to $175,000 per lot. I think that's probably pretty typical of where you would see people come in.
Is that a flip price or a wholesale price?
And it really could be a flip price.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
That frankly in our realistic range. But again, to do that, we'd want to again have, because we're not being here in Cape Cod, understanding the real estate there, how much it's changed even in the last 3 or 4 years. Has there,
Say that again.
This is where I get my roadblock.
Okay.
Goes
Yeah.
back to wanting to do homework, and goes back
Did
to
you say it was in his range, right?
Mhm.
Did I hear him right? He said it was in the range, more or
Yes.
less. Man, those are like my least favorite conversation. Well, they're awesome, right? But like, if someone tells me we're about there, then they decide they want to go do their own research. Oh man, what a lost opportunity here. Let's keep listening to him and then play with how we might have done that different.
been a move for either up or down because of what happened with COVID and people looking at being not necessarily living in a city? Has that been a positive or a negative? I honestly don't know. I've done it enough about real estate, and you would have a better feel than we do. We had the property. I didn't mention this, and this wasn't trying to avoid it, but we listed a property about 15 years ago for a very short period to test the market, and it never did much. The timing wasn't good. We finally pulled out because there was a property, particularly vacation property, was in a recess or had declined. And I even forgot how much we had listed it for at that point. It's probably in records that you can find the property listed at some point in the distant past. It was only for a very short period of time. It was with Kurt Fish, who had a lot of other properties for sale on Parker time, and he said, "I'll take a look at it." It wasn't really advertised much either, so it wasn't a serious effort to sell it then. We're just trying to test it.
Understood. And how long did you have that on the market?
I think it was only a matter of a year or less, or maybe it's 6 months. Yeah, I think it's Jane here listening to you on speakerphone.
Hi, Jane.
It may have been 6 months, and then it was basically an effort. We signed a contract for a limited period of time to say it was an effort to test the market. We weren't even convinced at that point that we wanted to sell, but we just want to see what the value is. This may have been, when we bought here from the Cape, we moved out of Boston suburbs to the Cape. At that point, we said, why do we have the place in Maine at this point? We're not going to move up there. Right. We have the property. We're not on the waterfront here in the Cape, but we're here. And it's no sense at this point for us to have, as we just discussed before, have a property to go to in Florida, then one in Maine, and then one in the Cape. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. No. Okay, perfect. No, this is really good information. What I would like to do is, I totally understand that you want to do your homework. But what I would like to do is at least get something formal in front of you.
Okay, is this where you kind of start talking through him? I'm going to send you a PA just so you have something to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So, Katie, a couple of tweaks here that I would make. Again, I think early on when he says, right, I think a lot of this could have been prevented early on of just seeing, like, would you part with the property if we came to terms, right? Yep. That's one thing I probably would. Which
is what we've talked about now consistently. Yep. It's in my word track now.
Yep. Perfect, right? That's one. By the time we got here, you sort of make your range offer and he doesn't turn you down, which tells me, okay, sweet. Now, when somebody tells me they want to do research, we know there's 4 types of objections, right? We've got price, we've got uncertainty, we've got timing, we've got partner spouse. Partner spouse, not an issue. We're locked in, right? Correct. Timing, not super important to him. They could sit on it for another year, 3 years, whatever, right? So that leaves price and uncertainty. And they kind of go hand in hand here, where he's like, I'm not sure if you're offering me enough maybe, or is it money, right? So where I'm going to go is, hey, when somebody tells me they need to do research, it's probably like one of a couple of things. And this is me as a sales rep. This isn't me talking to Greg yet, but all right, somebody tells me they need to do research. They either don't trust me and they're trying to get me off the phone, or they want to see if they can get a heck of a lot more money, right? Either one's fine, I guess, in their head, but I need to figure out which one it is so we can talk through it, right? So I'm going to start just by asking questions the same way, like we talked about yesterday, where I was like, hey, how would you ask your sister? Or like, you have that sense go off, right? I'm like, what is that? What does research even mean, right? So I'd be like, hey, Greg, hey, I totally want you to do your research if that's what you're looking to do. I will tell you, again, we've got a pretty good network in the area, and I might be able to help speed some of that up. Can I ask, what exactly are you hoping to find when you're doing that research? Right. And I'm trying to see, is he trying to figure out like absorption rates or what can be built, or it's probably price, but some form of that, well, I'm hoping to figure out, the evaluation. Yep. That makes sense. That makes sense. I guess is the
He
goal.
does say that.
Okay, perfect. And then I would just drill down on it and say something like, well, Greg, you did tell me again. So like, this is where it becomes really important that we sort of isolate that early on, because we can call it back, right? Greg, you did tell me that if we were to come to terms today, nothing would prevent us from working together. And it sounds like I'm in the range. So, I mean, is there anything we can do to sort of work through some details and maybe come to an agreement while we're chatting right now? And the only reason I'm nervous here, the holidays are around the corner. I don't want to play phone tag for the next 8 weeks. So can you just help me understand what are you thinking through right now? Right. And I like that help me verbiage to get people to talk a bit. And listen, I'm not sitting here guaranteeing, Katie, you say this contract, right? All the
It increases my odds.
There we go. We've been working together for a bit, haven't we? You're starting to sound like me. Yeah, totally. We're just trying to increase the odds, right? If we can drill down on it, make them feel more comfortable. Hey, you did say in the past that you had something you threw on the market and it didn't get much activity. I'm not saying whether this will or won't, but I can tell you there's always uncertainty in listing stuff on the market, right? It's why we as investors come in and we like to make this super easy for folks. And we offer a fair amount, right, in that range that I mentioned to you, just to make this easy. I mean, what's more important to you, Greg? Would you rather let it sit for a while, or would you rather like have some certainty and just knowing it's going to be done, right? I know you've been, it sounds like about a decade ago, you guys decided you want to sell it. But maybe the right thing just hasn't hit your desk, or the right partner to work with hasn't reached out to you yet, right? What do we need to do to be that right partner? And just play with it, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It makes sense now after we're having these conversations, and I'm going back to this call where I'm going, as I was listening to it, I thought, not that the call that we reviewed before was bad, right? It just had more improvements. This one has a little bit less improvements as the call prior. But it's just really interesting to listen to them back now going, okay, now for the next call that I have, am I going to have even less things that I need to continue to improve on based upon some of these, talk tracks and strategies that we're working through.
Exactly. You're so right. Okay. Did you guys set next steps here?
We did. I mean, I had essentially told him that I was going to go back to Brian. He was going to, do some underwriting. We were going to work to get something formal in front of them. I got all of his contact information. As I was working to close, he had explained to me that, what he wants to do is, really try and figure out, what a fair evaluation for the property would be. Sure. But he also said, but I do understand that you're in the business for getting a property that you can essentially make a profit off of, right? Yep. In one way or another.
Not a crazy idea.
It's not going to be an entitlement or subdivide here. You've got 2, 1 acre lots, right?
Right.
And then he explains that, I really want to check on the zoning, make sure nothing has changed, talk to the township. You can meet me. We can, walk the property. I can introduce you to the neighbors. I'm probably going to go up and do some clearing so everyone can really see the full picture. And I said, and we had talked about this, right, in one of our strategy sessions where you don't have to do that. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to do all those things for you. That's the convenience, because you already told me that you don't have time to travel up there to do those things. And that Gene is, ready to sell and not interested in putting any more time into and energy into this property, because you've got properties elsewhere that, she wants to be exactly where you need them to be. So I was able to kind of kibosh all these things that he had in his head as to what has to happen prior to being able to sell.
Right. Right. And it's like, hey, like everything you're talking about here, that's one of the benefits of working with us is we can take all
Exactly.
that off your plate.
Yes.
Right. So no, that's so good. That's so good. You know, and like I might call back time again. You always got to be sensitive based on who you're talking to, but it's like, Greg, like you mentioned you decided a decade ago you were going to sell it. I don't want it to take you another decade to get everything cleared, introduce somebody to the neighbors and talk to the township. I'd like to have this done by the end of the end of the year, if you would, you know,
Right.
what would it take for us to get this done by the end of the year? Right. And then when it comes to research too, I would just drill down on like, how long do you think that'll take? And then try to set another appointment if you can, right? Of just like, okay, so let's plan to touch base next Friday. You think you'll have everything done by next Friday? If not, let's just go ahead and have the conversation at least anyways, just to see where we're at. That way they can't cancel on you and be like, I haven't had time to do research, because they never will. They never will sit down, and some do. And then they're like, oh, I called my cousin who's a realtor and he told me I can get 20 million for this property. And I'm like, okay, great. Right. And I'm being facetious here. But hey, overall, Katie, like good call, I think. I think there's a couple of small areas that we could improve on. But overall, like this was good. I think we just tweak sort of
tweaking.
Yeah, we tweak. You know, we tweak some of that framing, we tweak some of those objections, we set next steps, we call people out on some BS. And
Yes.
I think this could have turned into a contract. You know, maybe on this call, maybe not. No promises, right? But again, the goal, to your point, is how do we just always set stack the odds in our favor, make it so the probability of doing the deal is just a little bit higher, right?
Higher. Exactly.
Sweet. Any other thoughts or questions that you want to leave the people with before we get out of here?
My goodness. You know what? I'm honestly just really excited to do the next one. Now that I'll have a little bit, a couple more tools in my toolbox. And I know Brian's watching live, so he's saying, Katie, put your hands down. Stop talking with your hands, right? So I get so excited.
I love it.
Super excited when I'm talking. But no, I mean, at this point, I left you a little side note in the bottom of the outline that I had sent to you. Just want to sort of talk through maybe some of the financials of this deal when we get some time. But otherwise, no, I'm just super grateful for the experience, and looking for our next call review.
Okay. I love it. Well, hey guys, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Would love to know if you guys think this is valuable. If you guys enjoy this type of material where we do a call review live. So it's one thing for me to be making calls. It's another for us to review it and coach it and work on it together and hear some practices. And Katie, I know this is a little bit scary, so thank you for being willing to come on. But guys, just let us know in the chat if you think this is valuable. Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. No, all good.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for everybody that tuned in live. We will catch you next time, and hope everyone has some great weekends. But thanks, everyone.